turn it over to Allison and let her and Rory go through the presentation that they have planned for us. We wanted this to be, and what we were asking Allison and Rory to get to provide for us today was, um, when a brand is looking to, use a brand advisory service, I'll say that as a big general category. What are the things they should be looking for? What are the things they should be thinking about before they do that? Are they in the right place to do it? What they should expect out of it? What are the things that they should be concerned about or look for to make sure will take place? Allison and Rory, I'll let them go through their own experience. But I think I started talking to Allison a number of months ago and got to meet Rory along the way. And they have some great background in producing, what I will say is branding assets for young brands and for actually some bigger brands too. So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. We'll let them get started, and then, of course, we'll take questions at the end. So, Allison, if you wouldn't mind getting started, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison. As Tom said, this is Rory.
Hello.
I'm going to share, we have a presentation to share, and then we can have kind of just like some more open sort of discussion. And find out what you guys are working on. I think I can't do full screen. And if there's anything we can help answer as far as your brands. So can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So what to consider when engaging branding service providers. So just by way of background, so Rory and I started our agency, G&T Creative, in 2020. So we focus exclusively on food and beverage, so CPG, but also hospitality, tech, kind of ancillary services, in addition to, your regular branded packaged goods. And we came from a bigger agency environment. That's how Rory and I actually met. I was a copywriter and creative strategist, and he was the executive creative director at an agency called the Food Group, which is part of WPP in New York City. And we were working with a lot of really big brands like Mondelez and Mars and Tabasco and brands like that. And then we really wanted to work more directly with mid-size and emerging brands and to really kind of be more hands-on and help make more of a difference. So that was really our goal in starting G&T. So again, as I mentioned, my background, I'm a writer by sort of trade and sort of transition into creative strategy, but also continuing to work as a copywriter. So really helping bridge the business and the marketing strategy with the creative execution. Rory, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Rory Tischler. So I'm a creative director, graphic designer. I've got a long history in graphic design in the food industry, in the food world. Starting with I was at Food and Wine magazine. I was the creative director there on the marketing, events, and sales side for about 13 years. From there, went over to the food group. So, you know, initially in magazines, then going to design for the food industry, with and doing a lot of stuff within food service and in branding and new brands, and promotion. And now I'm here with you guys.
Yeah, and then we have basically kind of a small core team of people that we bring in. There are designers and art directors, a publicist, a web person, but we keep it really small and very boutique. So that's really kind of our approach. And, we'll talk a little bit about really what this is about is, this is just some examples of our branding work, just to give you a little bit of background and context. So as I mentioned, working with food, beverage, but also other kind of related services, doing like the full gamut of branding and package design as well as marketing. So
A
really the
small
goal,
sample, very
sorry,
small sample, a small sampling.
yes.
Yeah.
So, just to kind of go into questions we'll be answering and what we want to kind of make sure that you get out of this from, bringing our experience to you is Well, what actually is branding, first of all, because I think that's a word that gets used a lot, but just getting down to basics of what it actually means. How do you find a branding partner? So, obviously, being a branding agency, we are really familiar with the process and the landscape, and I know it can feel kind of overwhelming when you know you need to hire someone to do this help, but with you, but you don't necessarily know where to look. And how do you know what you need? Like this is a big thing too. If you don't have a background in this and you are really focusing on the business and operations and all those other really time consuming and challenging things, like you might not know what you need. So we want to kind of help elucidate that too. How much did it cost? Like this is a big question that everyone always wants to know. So we'll talk a little bit about that. How much time does it take? Another thing, like it's very good to, I think, go into any engagement with someone kind of having a sense of these things will help you with, just being more empowered to make those decisions and hire. And then I'm not a designer or marketer. How do I know if the work is good? This is something that comes up a lot. Again, you might not have this background. Your strengths are in other areas. So you need to hire on that expertise. But how do you know if it's good and that you're getting, the best bang for your buck? And what do I need to know so I don't get screwed? This is something that, there are some things you can do to mitigate the risk of paying. We know that as startups, investing in branding work is kind of scary because you are counting every dollar. It can be really hard to pull the trigger and go with someone. So this is just a few of our kind of like insider tips in trying to protect yourself as much as possible so that you really get the best outcome that you can. So just to start out, what is branding versus marketing? So branding is your brand's unique story, messaging, and visual identity versus marketing, the ongoing promotion of said brand. So while a brand is, I think, always evolving, you really kind of want to set out who your brand is from the beginning. And then all the marketing that follows is how you really get that brand into the market. You might be doing different campaigns, you might be trying different channels, you might be trying different tactics, but really the core of your brand, like not just how it looks, but really the deeper essence of it should remain the same. If you've really done the work at the beginning, which is really what we're going to talk about here. And of course, many agencies do both, like G&T, we do branding and we offer marketing services. Some agencies are solely focused in branding. Doesn't really mean one is better than the other. It can be an advantage to work with an agency that also does other types of marketing because you can continue working with them on an ongoing basis as your brand grows and the relationship evolves. But you might find an agency that only does branding that you really like and you really connect with, which is great. And if that's what your gut tells you, go with them. So kind of on that note, some points about finding a branding partner. So the first thing we sort of mentioned, or one of the questions that said we were going to be answering, where to look. So direct referrals, obviously a lot of you via, wonderful organizations like Brandjectory are very connected with other startups. So this is kind of an obvious one, but it's a great place to start. If you really like a colleague or someone, an acquaintance, a friend, if you really like their branding, just ask them, who they worked with and also what their experience was. I think having those direct conversations can really help because you might really like the result, but maybe there's something they really want you to know about the process and how they got there. Like there are a lot of things to be gained from having those conversations with connections you have already. LinkedIn, of course, is a great way to start, whether it's, again, brands or service providers you're already connected to, or by just kind of going down the LinkedIn rabbit hole and searching those hashtags and looking at what other founders are posting. That can lead you to some really great service providers. Industry groups, so again, things like this, or industry events, if you live in a city that has a Naturally chapter or you're involved with Startup CPG, they're all great places to also find service providers, especially if you don't necessarily have a really built out network yourself, if this is not really your area. And of course, just Google. I mean, surprisingly, we've found a number of clients have come to us by literally finding us on Google, which we didn't really think would ever happen, but it has. So, when you just start putting in those search terms, you might stumble upon an agency that looks really good and that you really like. And it's always worth reaching out to them and having a conversation. Just, always keep that in mind. Like, you're not committing to anything when you just find an agency or a partner that you like and you just want to have a conversation. So never be afraid to just reach out. So how to vet. So, okay, maybe you have a short list or you have a few agencies that you found or someone's referred you to that they look really exciting and really promising. So how do you know actually if they're any good and they're trustworthy? Well, the first thing is, like, do you like their work? You don't need to be an expert in design to just know that you like something. And I think it's really important, and something that kind of gets lost is just, do you personally like their vibe? Do you like their website, the way they present themselves, the way they talk about themselves? And of course, the work itself should really speak to itself. And of course, liking means, do you feel like it fits in within your kind of aesthetic or what you gravitate towards? Because some agencies might do really spectacular work, but it's just not the vibe that you like and are looking for. So don't ever kind of feel like, let someone talk you into using someone that doesn't really resonate with you. And do like them. Like, this is a very personal thing, and you will be collaborating extremely closely with the service provider that you choose. So you want to have those conversations, get on a Zoom call, make sure that you have some connection and that you feel like you can communicate with them, because this is going to be an ongoing partnership, and you want to make sure that there are going to be things that come up after the work is done. You might need files, you might have questions, you might not be quite sure how to use an asset. You're going to need to contact them again. Maybe you are going to need additional help with other projects as you grow. So it's great if you start with an agency that you have that potential to grow with. Can they provide references and or testimonials? You don't need to go with the biggest, most blue chip, expensive agency that has, a huge portfolio of fancy work. That's not really as important as, do you like the work that they do have, and do they have some type of, is it testimonials from their clients? Ask if you can get in touch with one of their clients if you aren't seeing testimonials or you're not super comfortable with them. That's important, that any good branding agency should happily want to refer you to their other clients, because their other happy clients, we are lucky to feel this way, like, are their best sales tools. Like, we love referring people because we have been lucky to have great clients and have a great ongoing relationship with them. So if they can't do this or they're hesitating, like, that's definitely a red flag. Where are they based and does it matter? So we added this one in because obviously we're all located probably in different places. We're all very used to working in this very virtual way. But for some people it does matter. For some people, having a local connection is important. So it's just something to think about, or just ask yourself, like, does it matter to you? Is it more important for you to find a partner that you mesh well with, that's the right price point, that you like their work and it doesn't matter where they are? Or is it really important to you to have them be local, to understand the region you come from, to be able to meet in person? These are just important things that you're going to also want to ask yourself as you're doing your vetting. Does all this make sense so far? Does anyone have any questions? No? I will go on. So questions to ask when you are at that point of engaging an agency or talking to them anyway. So what is their process? Now, every agency, of course, has a different process. That's fine. The point is that they should have one and they should be able to explain it. So I think that when we talk about branding, it can feel very abstract. Like, what even is it? What are they actually going to do? How are they going to get you from point A to point B of, okay, I don't have anything, or maybe I'm ready for a rebrand. Like, we know we have kind of clients come to us in both stages, which I imagine some of you are in both stages. Either you're literally just starting out and you have nothing, or maybe you had a logo made and you come some stuff up yourself just to get something off the ground. Great, but now you're maybe looking for investment. You're growing. You're ready to professionalize. You're looking for someone. So whatever your situation is, when you do talk to a branding agency, they should have a process to explain how they do what they do. So our process, we do what we call a brand discovery session, where we do a deep dive with the founders, it can be virtual, into really the essence of their brand and why they wanted to start the company to begin with, what their values are, the product itself, the competitive set, what differentiates it, all of those things, as well as the visual aspect, what calls to them, what other brands they like. things like that. And then we always do 3 different versions of a logo and sometimes like a package design direction done by 3 different art directors. And we do that in order to basically give the brief to 3 completely different designers that we trust and know and have them put their own kind of design perspective on it to come up with 3 very different options, which we then will narrow down from there with the client. And then we go into all of the other granular detail that comes out of that. So that's our process. Other agencies will have their own process, but they should be able to tell you what it is. How long will it take? Okay, this is always a question. Get a schedule. We always make schedules for clients, and we would always advise that any agency or that you work with that they should do that, because when you have this kind of vague, oh yeah, we'll send this then and we'll get feedback and we'll send revisions, like that means someone's going to drop their end of it and it's going to get drawn out. So the schedule is for the client as much as for us in terms of being accountable and giving feedback, because that can be a thing that really holds things up. So you should know how many rounds of revision you're getting for deliverables, when feedback is expected, and when they're going to turn around the next round. So be realistic about the schedule and uphold your end of it. If you know you're going on vacation, if you know you have a big trade show, if you know it's a busy season, like, be realistic instead of just assuming you're going to be able to just get it done, even if it takes a little bit longer than you think. And okay, how long? Of course, this is completely subjective, but just kind of to keep in mind, like 2 months would be fast. Like that would be the very minimum that you would be looking at if you go into a branding exercise from scratch. Because if you think about it, it's not just, oh, we're going to start designing a logo immediately. Like the agency has to thoroughly understand the brand, go through this iterative process, and then get feedback and work from there. So the 8 weeks would be like the very minimum that you can expect, just to kind of like set your expectations of, okay, I need this. I'm going to start looking around for a partner. I need to vet them. I need to get an agreement in place. I need to start the work. Some agencies, depending on the season, might be busy. They might need to start a little bit later. So just give yourself enough time and don't expect something that's going to be turned around super quickly, because it's not going to happen. And if it does, it probably won't be very good, honestly. Who's on their team? Ask who's on their team and who's actually doing the work. Some agencies are going to outsource some work maybe to freelancers or to others, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you should just know, because the one thing you don't want is the bait and switch, where sometimes agencies, mid-size or larger in particular, might have a website full of all this beautiful work, and they kind of end up giving you the B team. Like they give you the junior designer. Again, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Like they might have sort of tiers of services, and kind of like when you get a haircut and you might have a senior stylist or a junior stylist. Like, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but you kind of want to know exactly what you're actually getting, because if you see work and you fall in love with it and it's from their executive creative director, that's not who you're going to be working with. So don't be afraid to ask those questions and to get a real answer about them. And then how many rounds of revision are included? So this is something that I kind of mentioned when talking about timeline. We always include 2 rounds of revision. You want to make sure you have at least 2 rounds of revision, because you are going to need them. And if you haven't clarified this up front, expectations can just be off really on both sides. And then finally, how much will it cost? So there's no number answer to this. Sorry if you thought you were going to get one. It comes down to like anything in life. How much is it worth to you to have it done? And how much is it worth our time to do it? Okay. And that can mean a lot of different things. We are an agency that is able to work at a very, I would say, efficient way, because we don't have a lot of overhead. So we are able to work with smaller clients, right? There is still a huge range of this, and you just have to ask. And oftentimes you might need to get into a phone call and get into a proposal to actually get an answer. And it's not, I know it can be annoying, like you just want to know the number. And some agencies will do that. They almost have a package and they'll tell you up front. But it's not to be annoying or draw things out that sometimes agencies aren't able to tell you that right away. It's because we really need to understand the essence of the deliverable and what is actually needed, which we're going to go into a little bit more. But just to kind of sort of, not to put too fine a point on that, but and then red flags to watch out for. So again, when you are vetting and kind of exploring and asking these questions, so In your agreement with them, we're not lawyers. We'll just say that up front. Disclaimer, it's good to talk to a lawyer, have your lawyer look over agreements. But these are just very basic things that are important that we've noticed over the years people don't necessarily know about. So all deliverables should be works for hire owned by you, the client. So this is important because this means that the work that the agency is doing is not theirs, that you actually own it. And that's always in our agreements, and that should definitely be in yours. Often they have some sort of a clause or a caveat saying that they would like to use it for their portfolio. That is totally fine. Please let them do that. It's how agencies continue to get work and business, and that should be spelled out. But the deliverable should be works for hire owned by you. Understand what is and isn't included. This should be very much spelled out. When you get into things like font licensing or stock photography or assets, you might think, oh, that was going to be included, but those are hard costs that are probably not going to be included. So you need to understand that and set the expectation about what the end deliverable actually is and what is not, what might be additional that you are going to have to pay as the brand. What if you don't receive production files because of a dispute? It's like going into a marriage. Everyone wants to think it's all going to be great, but you got to prepare for the possibility that it won't, right? So if for some reason you do not complete the work with them or it doesn't go to plan, you should have something in the agreement that will at least have some. You can't, of course, kind of plan for every scenario, but at least plans for some of that, because what you don't want is your production files to be held, hijacked because, there was some disagreement about you didn't do what you said and, etc. So again, it's hard to prevent entirely against this, but it is a good thing to consider in an agreement. And P.S. You should have an agreement. I think that, especially if you're working with a smaller agency or a freelancer, even a freelancer, one person, doesn't matter. You need to have an agreement that has these things and anything else that would go into a standard agreement, which you can kind of look them up online. Like we have ours, other agencies have theirs, but we won't go into that completely. But you need to have something in writing. It doesn't matter who you're working with, but that's important. Font licensing, Rory, can you talk about this?
Yes. So, once you start working with a designer creative, you want to make sure that they are working with fonts that you can afford. They might not cost anything. If it's an Adobe font, they're working in Adobe. If you have Adobe and you've got the Adobe plan, you'll have access to those fonts and it won't be an issue. I don't really use Google fonts, but they might have the same type of thing going on there. But if they're using a font that, they've downloaded a version of it, could have been years ago, and they're designing in it, and you fall in love with this design, this logo that uses this font, and then it turns out that font is going to cost you $8,000 to use. It could be even more with certain fonts. It could be a lot less. The key is just knowing where the fonts are coming from, what the licenses are, how much it's going to cost. Because there's you have a license for to use the font in your branding. Then if you're going to build a website and you want to embed that font into your website, that's another license. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be very expensive, but you just want to be sure they're not using something that you're going to have to change because it becomes, way too expensive.
Um, you can take this one too, Rory.
Yeah, yeah. So, that once somebody's kind of working and designing your logo, you want to make sure that they are working in the right programs. If somebody's designing your logo in Photoshop, just squash that right off the bat. I think that means you've found the wrong kind of partner. You want to work with somebody who's working in vector. That means that your logo is going to be it can be blown up as large as you need. Let's say you get a billboard. Let's say you're wrapping a truck for deliveries. Anything like that. It's really important to have your logo be vector based, so Illustrator for the most part. I mean, there's a couple other programs, but I would say it's worth asking the question. That way, they don't say, "Oh yeah, I'm designing everything in Canva," and then you're left with assets that are going to be really troublesome down the road.
Jumping right into design, so this just being a red flag because, as I mentioned, the agency or partner you work with should have a process, and that has to really start with understanding your brand values, helping you also articulate them and hone them. If when you do jump right into design, which I know can kind of be the temptation when you just want to hire a designer to make your logo, often that is where you're not going to get the best quality work and the work that's actually going to last and create like a really enduring brand, which is always our goal. And then over promising to get your business, like honestly, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If someone says they're going to deliver you this whole laundry list of things and 3D product renders and this and that for a very small price, definitely be suspicious of that because that probably means they're offshoring or using AI entirely for it. And it's just, you're probably not going to get a great result in the end. Like maybe some things will be usable, maybe some things won't. Maybe some things won't really be editable. You won't really be able to make changes. Like when you get that feeling of over promising, like just you should heed that. So, what to expect? So, this is a big thing, right? Like, you're getting branding. Like, what does that mean? So, there should be some type of discovery process. Like we said, we have ours, but they should really be taking the time to get to know you and your brand. The end deliverable. So, the end deliverable, in essence, it's going to be a brand or style guide. Some people might call it something else, but it should include, and maybe you have some of these elements, maybe you don't, which is why there's going to be some variability, but name, tagline, brand story, brand values, a messaging hierarchy, the visual aspects, logo, fonts, color palettes, which they should be giving you in RGB, CMYK, and solid Pantones, and then sample executions. Again, some agencies might do slightly different things, but this is essentially what a style guide or a brand guide is. Like this is actually what the branding deliverable is. That should include production files, so collected files for logos, packaging, any related art. You should be able to have a folder that has logos in various formats, as Rory was saying, that you can then go and use for any other application that you need to. And then ask for specific things because, again, agencies might do things differently and you might expect something that they're not doing, or they might spend time doing something and that's baked into their price that you don't really need. So make sure that you have a concrete list of deliverables and that you, are able to customize them really as needed.
And Allison, before you jump, going
Yeah.
back, the just in regards to the production files, also you may not ever need to deal with the actual vector like logo and branding. You may not need the Illustrator file, but you should have it. Okay, you're probably going to deal with the JPEG. You're probably going to deal with the PNG. Um, but you should have the actual files that they designed in, not necessarily the work in progress file, but that final file. Because at some point, if you start working with someone else, you're working with another designer, you want to be able to pass them off the assets that they're going to need, whether it's altering the logo slightly, whether it's applying it to something else, changing colors, all of that. So you want to make sure that that's part of your deliverable package in the end.
Packaging. So I'm going to let Rory take this as more of the packaging expert. We just wanted to have a little coda on this because this is where things can get a little hairy when you start working with an agency. So,
Yeah, so you always want to just be cautious and ask all the questions. Packaging can get very confusing. There are a lot of disciplines involved. There's, creating the actual packaging, the cuts. There's how your product applies to it, how your product sits in it. So you want to ask all the questions. Does your package need to be custom, or can you work with a vendor or printer for your packaging where they have a template. If you're going with something that's custom, it's going to be so much more expensive. If you're doing custom cuts and it's something that they haven't done before, they need to create entirely new dies and new fold marks and everything. It can get very expensive. So when you start approaching how you're thinking about your packaging, especially in the early stages, you kind of want to go with something that is maybe a little more part of a templated piece than actually doing a custom. Um, oh, so yeah, so then you want to ask your vendor about the packaging, how they design, what their process is, and get them talking about it so that way you get an understanding for what they know. If you start talking about your ideas, if they don't bring up a single thing that like, oh, okay, well this could be an issue. We might want to think about this or that. That's a good thing. You want them to kind of call you out on any little thing that you're like, oh, I'm dreaming of doing this. It's a pull tab and then this pops up and then all that, all these things are gonna get very expensive. They might not even be possible. So if they kind of say, oh, hey, actually let's slow down, that might create an issue. That means you're talking to somebody who at least is well versed in what's going on that side of the project. um Next. um yeah, so then, once you figure out, okay, what your packaging is going to be, if you have your vendor who's actually going to be producing the packaging, you want to make sure you're getting the exact specs from them. You want to make sure you're getting all the information, is including color limitations. Depending on how many of whatever it is you're printing, whether it's you're wrapping a can, doing direct print to a can, it could be very different. For example, there's if you're wrapping a can, you could use four color process. You could print every color in the world on it. But if you're growing and you're producing more of this product, you're going to want to go direct to can print, because it's just much more cost effective. But then you're limited to four or five colors, and you want to make sure that your product is you can reproduce your product within those limitations, as you grow. So these are just things you want to be involved in these conversations, and you just want to make sure you're thinking it through because it can be very expensive to fix down the road, and you don't want to have to go through rebranding because of, a question that you didn't ask or didn't understand.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, this is important because this is really your responsibility as the founder or whoever in the company to know, because you are the one who are going to be bringing the specs to the branding agency. And feel free to put them in touch with your printer, your vendor, and help get them the right files and all that. But it is your responsibility to understand your packaging, your costs, what is and isn't possible. We know that's also a bit of a learning curve, but that's also why you need to be having those conversations with your packaging vendor. So setting yourself up for success. So we talked a bit about most of these things. Don't start with "I need a logo." No agents. Every agency is going to hate hearing that, but it's for a good reason, as I think we kind of went into before. Be wary of the bells and whistles, and really think about what you really need. So don't. Just be aware when it feels like an agency might be kind of stuffing the deliverable with stuff that isn't really going to be that meaningful to you.
Yeah,
And
like for example, like if somebody says, "Okay, I'm going to do a package design for you," and they do a package design, then they say, "Now I'm going to do a video 3D rendering to show you your product rotating around," and this is in the first round of creative. It's okay, not necessary right now.
yeah,
You
it's a
may
bit of
want that
a
down the road, for whatever reason, for social, or just so to confirm that you like the way it looks from all angles, but you don't need it in the beginning. So you don't want to have to pay for that in the beginning.
Again, thinking through what really matters to you, gathering reference. We're going to show a sample mood board in our next slide, which is really our last thing. But really start thinking about it now. It's never too early to start gathering reference from other brands, from art, from the natural world, quotes you like. I mean, textures, colors, moods, inspiration. Like, you have to really start that process now so that you have something to bring to your branding agency to help set them up, to set you up for success. Because when you haven't done that thinking through and you haven't sort of done your own prep work and homework, it's going to be really hard. You're going to be going through that process with them, which is probably going to be pretty frustrating for both of you. Of, oh, I realize I really don't like XYZ, or I realize that, I really want this to be very minimalist, or I want this to be very bright and poppy. Like, you should think those things through before, about really honestly like what your personal taste is and what you can envision, or what family you want your product to and your brand to live in. um, Know how to provide feedback. So this is really like in the providing of feedback is where the relationship can start to kind of go awry, just because it can be difficult and frustrating for an agency to get unclear feedback, but it can also be really difficult for you guys as brands to feel like you're not being heard. So just, this is also a process, but trying to be as specific as possible. It doesn't mean you have to be telling them how to design. And don't ever worry about saying like, I just don't like this color, or like this feels too down. I want it to feel more positive. Those are all actually really helpful. Like,
Yeah.
so don't be afraid to just give your real impressions, and just try to be as specific as possible, because it's actually incredibly helpful for us to hear.
But also don't throw in specifics if you're not sure why. Because that's one of the things. If somebody says, I don't like it, and then trying to key in on something you don't like about it, even when you don't know what that is. I think it's actually a really good and honest statement to say, I don't like it, but I'm not sure why. And then let them help you with that conversation. Your creative partner is they're gonna try and get it out of you because they want to key in on what you don't like. So, but if you say, I don't like it, I don't like blue. If it's blue, okay, now what you're doing is you're shutting down blue when that might not have been the problem, to begin with. So don't be afraid of not knowing why you do like something or don't. And you can talk to them and explain that to them and kind of
Yeah.
work through it from there.
That's a good point. Also, asking for honest external opinions and not being afraid of the negative ones. So, take a little informal survey of friends, family, acquaintances, social media followers. Don't be afraid to show what the options are that the agency came up with, and ask for opinions. Like, we had a client do this, like actually do a survey, and we thought it was really interesting because the winner ended up being maybe one of his top three, but not the top one that he would have chosen. But he went with it because he was trying to be really objective and actually get some data around it, which I thought was amazing. So ask for those opinions, and also embrace the negative ones. You don't have to listen to them, but it's just good to know and to not be kind of afraid of it. Um, and branding is an ongoing process, so don't be afraid to like break something. Don't be afraid to not go out with it until it's perfect. Like, it is going to evolve in terms of your messaging, your story, the way you talk about your products. Maybe other things will evolve. So remember that it is not going to be totally set in stone, and don't be chasing perfection to the point that you are not going to just get the work done. And enjoy the process. So it should really be fun. Like, this should be like one of the most fun things you do. Like, when you're, talking about packaging and food safety and cogs and boring stuff, like, this should be like the fun part of your day when you get to do this. So you should be working with someone that you enjoy working with, and thinking of it as your training as well. It's like a little boot camp for you in branding and marketing, which is really invaluable, and it's something that you will take with you with whatever ventures or whatever else you end up doing in life. Um, Last thing, and we can open up to some questions. This is just a mood board example, just to kind of give you a sense of the type of reference when we say gather your reference now. Rory, do you want to talk a little bit about this since you made it?
Yeah, so mood boarding, it can be a very personal thing where sometimes it doesn't actually make sense to the outside world or anybody else unless you like talk through it and explain it. But like what Allison said before, when you're mood boarding, you really need to don't think if you're coming up with a type of granola that you need to look at all packaged food like granolas and cereals and health foods, like kind of go everywhere, look all over. What kind of textures do you like? Do you like stuff that's classic and old feeling? Do where you want to pull like old newspaper clippings or whatever it is? So, if you have a vibe that you're thinking for your brand, if you have something that you're, sort of leaning towards with the message or the story behind the brand for why you did it, um, pull those references, dump them into a folder. It doesn't need to be organized. You'll do that after, but collect those things that you feel resonate with the brand. Sometimes it really could be absolutely anything. It could be a sign that you saw outside. Take a photo with your phone, drop it in the folder. And as you start to realize what the brand is, what you want it to be, what that personality is, you're going to start to pull those things together and kind of fine tune it into something. Okay, here we go. This is all starting to feel like it. And sometimes you'll have an example and it's the wrong color palette because you're like, oh, that's not really, that's not really what I'm looking for the color. That's fine. Make a note. You can put a note on and say, I like this for the content, not the color. Anything like that. And when you can give that to your creative partner, they're going to start to even more so understand what you're looking for. And then together you kind of work to fine tune the mood board and you fine tune the vibe and the flow and the emotion that you want it to evoke. Um, and it really kind of sets you up for getting into the first stages of design in a really great way.
And finally, just to end with a quote from this bearded guy: give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first four sharpening the axe. So we like this quote because really that's what you're doing when you go through the branding and the discovery process is you are sharpening your axe. When you really want to go into the market and make an impact, you need to invest that time and those resources into the deep thought and work and preparation in order to really get you the best result. Um, so that's it.
Thank
Questions?
you. This was
You're
excellent.
welcome.
I put your contact information in the chat.
Oh,
We
great.
have a question in the chat, but I have a couple questions first, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
This was excellent. What from like my perspective, Susan's perspective, we could have gone through each page and say we ran into a brand here that made this mistake.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think that's what shows, you were really thinking about how brands should think about, when they want to engage somebody. I have a couple of questions. One is brand founders do this to themselves. They hear this a lot. You need a rebrand. So
Mm,
in just that before that thought of okay, you either you've gotten on the shelf a little bit, you're starting out, maybe you've picked up some investors, brands start thinking that maybe that's the next jump that they can make. What to you, when somebody comes to you and says, I need a rebrand, how do you address that with them? How do you walk them through the process to find out if they really need a rebrand and if it's
yeah.
really worth it?
That's a really good question. I think that of course the sales numbers are going to speak to that probably the best because it is true that if you're a CPG brand, your packaging is your most important marketing asset, right? Like there's almost no point in investing in other things if there is some fatal flaw in your packaging that's causing people not to pick it up off the shelf. So if you have investors or other people saying that you need a rebrand, then that would probably you would hope that would be the reason why, and it shouldn't be an arbitrary thing, right? If your product is really not moving, even though people say it's really good, and you don't have a quality issue or other operational issues, like that could very well be why. And it comes from a good place because it can be hard. Like sometimes you're really attached to the original brand, and we definitely see this a lot where sometimes clients are resistant to the fact that they really should do something different. But also, whoever's telling you that, whether it's your investors or your agency or your retailers, they should have a really distinct reason why. And when we've made the same suggestion, we always do have a reason why, which is usually it looks too much like other stuff. It doesn't pop up off the shelf. Like you can take a photo on your phone of the shelf and it totally fades. Like that's a reason to do, honestly, like that's a reason to do a rebrand. And it can be a bitter pill to swallow, but so much better in the long term to do it, especially before you get too big and you have too many of those units out there.
Okay. That's Thank you. I appreciate that the thoughts around that. The other question I had, the other place where we've seen a lot of uh, brands, I don't want to say get into trouble, but in that discovery phase, the branding agency is always like, I get it, I get it, I get it, I get it. I understand what you want. Is there some red flags when you're going through that discovery process that tell you that would tell a brand founder that the agency really isn't getting it, that they're really not understanding? Are there things that they should really look for to understand if that's happening?
I'm gonna answer this one, and this is something that Allison has always done when we've worked with brands that I so appreciate, and I can see in clients that we've done it with. Um, she comes back after we do these brand discoveries. She comes back with, "Here's what we heard." Okay, and she breaks it down, and some of it is just, kind of bullet points, whatever. But it says, here's what we heard from you in our discussion, here's what we learned. And when they read that and they say, yes, okay, now we're off to a good place. If we don't send that, they don't get to confirm that we understand and we're kind of on the same page as them. So I think that is a good thing to do, to just, ask for that. Can you guys recap this for us before we get on to the next step?
Okay, excellent. The last question I had, and there's at least one in the chat here. Last question maybe not a question, but more of a statement. The packaging issue that Rory, that you spoke to, is so important because sometimes founders get in the mode of, well, my co-packer can only do this, or they don't think about what happens in the future if they have to change either a vendor for a package or the bottle, or they have to find another co-man. They're not thinking through those things, and it's just something I've seen happen a lot over time, where they're not thinking about what is standard and how do I make standard work. And I guess that's a comment. I don't know if that's if there's anything else you'd like to mention about that.
I mean, I think if you can start with standard and start with, sort of something on the more simple side, it's gonna you'll have less pain points kind of as you start to grow. And it's not that everything has to be simple in its, kind of its evolution and its design and its feel. But you will tend to have less friction in the beginning, as you grow. So.
Okay. The question that we had in the chat is from Lynn, and it's is it better to hire an agency that already knows your category thoroughly, or should you try to look at agencies that are new to it and maybe have a different perspective? And I think this kind of goes into Rory's mood board a little bit about sometimes it's style, not just simply hey, I know what your product is and I know what you want. It's like, well, what do you want? Because you've seen things you like other places. So I'll stop there. Allison or Rory, if you'd like to take that question.
I mean, I they both have their merits, if somebody knows the category, if they can approach it, kind of removing themselves from everything that's out there, which I think is a hard thing to do sometimes. But if they can, and you feel like that's how they work and they can do that, great. Um, but the fresh perspective, you can make a giant leap with a fresh perspective. You get somebody who comes in, they have not designed a package for this type of product, and they come in with something totally different and totally, just, out there considering, for what's currently in the market. You can kind of make some waves doing that. But you just don't want to hire somebody who is, coming in with a fresh perspective, but also doesn't understand the production of any of it. If you understand the production, if they can, take all those specs and manage that and think it through, then I don't know if I've even answered that question or if I've said there's merits to both, but yeah, I mean, I love fresh perspective. I think that's where things get, that's where you kind of push the envelope a bit. But
Okay, thank you. We have time for more questions here. If anybody, you can just pop in or raise your hand or put it in the chat. I do want to thank Allison and Rory for being here today. I really appreciate it. We put the website, your LinkedIn's and emails in the chat. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, they can.
Thanks,
So
Tom. Thanks for having us. And yeah, I
yeah,
mean, we're always
appreciate
happy
it. Are there
to.
any closing comments, Allison, that you have?
No, I mean, we're always happy to just answer questions too. If anyone ever, feel free to always just drop us a line, and always happy just to meet new brands and chat. So
Well, I thank you for being here. I thank you for your time today. I hope the storm has passed for everybody and wherever you are and you're safe. I know a few that are in Florida and other places, so you guys are good. But if you are somewhere where this storm is, stay safe. And hopefully the temperatures are good for you. And with that, we will say goodbye. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Rory. We really appreciate it.
thank
thank
you,
you all.
Tom.
Appreciate it.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye bye.